All right, so move on to the next segment. We'll be switching gears here to the world of MMA inside the UFC world, and I'll be sharing my thoughts on the hottest fights that we'll be seeing this summer in the UFC. Dana White and the rest of the UFC executives have set us up for a great summer in the combat sports world, especially in the UFC, with some big time fights and some big time main events for the summer in the UFC world. So we get Charles Oliveira versus Ilia Topuria for the vacant lightweight title. We get Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier for Dustin Poirier's final dance, the trilogy, with the BMF title being on the line. And we also get Dricus du Plessis against Khamzat Chimaev for the middleweight title. So I'll be sharing a small glimpse into the future of those three respective fights in this segment. Starting off with the first fight that we'll see, which will be Charles Oliveira versus Ilia Topuria. So Charles Oliveira and Ilia Topuria, this fight will be in the main event of UFC 317 for International Week for the vacated lightweight title, as Islam Makhachev has completely vacated the lightweight title. He's moved up to the welterweight division to become a two-division world champion. Now, this is a perfect fight. You can't get anything better than this at the lightweight division between Charles Oliveira and Ilia Topuria. This is going to be a fun fight. And Styles makes fights in that octagon. And I think we get a special one here for the main event of UFC 317. Especially, this is a huge test for Ilia Topuria making his lightweight debut. We know how phenomenal he was at the featherweight division, defeating Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway, becoming the only man in the UFC to knock out both of those respective legends. But there's levels to this game, especially at the lightweight division, fighting an all-time great in Charles Oliveira at this division. But Styles makes fights here. I want to see how Ilia Topuria's tremendous footwork, his MMA IQ, mixed with his boxing background and the great grappling skills. Remember, nobody has really tested Ilia Topuria to go deep into his grappling abilities, into his grappling bag. And I want to see if Charles Oliveira can bring it out, because Charles Oliveira has a great jiu-jitsu background, great mixed martial arts background with the great grappling skills and the abilities to finish his opponents in the blink of an eye. So this is going to be one hell of a fight between Charles Oliveira and Ilia Topuria in the main event of UFC 317. Now, I do have some questions here for this fight. I want to know if Ilia Topuria is possibly at a disadvantage moving up in weight, because Charles Oliveira is a veteran that has seen it all at this lightweight division. He's gotten the octagon with the best of the best. He's gotten there with Islam Makhachev, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and several others. Arman Sarukin and several others at this division. But Ilia Topuria, this is his first time. And this is could be a bad draw. Depending on how this fight goes, it could be a bad draw that Ilia Topuria had to fight Charles Oliveira, possibly instead of Justin Gaethje, who also had his hat in the conversation for possibly getting a lightweight title fight next. But another question is, does this fight truly favor Charles Oliveira if it goes into the deep waters, the championship rounds, round 4, round 5? Because in these championship fights, that from the footage, Ilia Topuria has not gone into the championship rounds in some big time championship fights yet. Alexander Volkanovski, that fight at the featherweight division ended in second round knockout in favor of Ilia Topuria. Then against Max Holloway, that ended up in a knockout victory against Max Holloway in the third round. So we have not seen Ilia Topuria swim to the deep waters in championship rounds just yet. So that could favor Charles Oliveira as well. But another question I have is, will Ilia Topuria's power be too much for Charles Oliveira to handle? Because the power that this man has, he has lightning quick hands. The hand movement is very quick from Ilia Topuria. And if you're not looking, if you're not ready, if you're not alert defensively, 1-2 combination, a stiff jab coming down with that boxing background, landing some devastating and dangerous hooks. I'm just saying that we're going to see a lot. We're going to have a lot of my questions going to be answered for the main event of UFC 317. The end of June can't come fast enough, because I can't wait to cover that fight for you guys. But that one is definitely circled on my calendar for possibly fight of the year between Charles Oliveira and Ilia Topuria. Now, next fight that we'll be seeing, this one will be taking place in July for the main event of UFC 318 between Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier. This will be Dustin Poirier's final dance, and what better way to end his career in a trilogy against Max Holloway with the BMF title being on the line. Now, my thoughts on this: Dana White and the rest of the UFC executives couldn't have put a picture-perfect ending for Dustin Poirier to go out on a high note and to possibly be known as the baddest motherfucker leaving the octagon in your final fight against Max Holloway. Now, this is going to be a highly anticipated lightweight fight in the main event of UFC 318, but this is a trilogy, and the first two fights we have seen Dustin Poirier get the better part of Max Holloway. Remember, the first fight that these two respective fighters fought at, it was Dustin Poirier who submitted Max Holloway, forced him into submission. Then the second time these two respective fighters fought, it was Dustin Poirier who won the fight by unanimous decision. So it's 2-0 in favor of Dustin Poirier, but I want to see how Max Holloway responds in this trilogy, because remember, the last time we seen him move up to the lightweight division, he did fight Justin Gaethje and put on one hell of a performance at UFC 300 and had knockout of the year across the board in combat sports, UFC, MMA, and boxing. I want to see how Max Holloway looks comfortable at the lightweight division again. And you know he's going to want his get back for losing the first two fights in this trilogy against Dustin Poirier. But I do believe, a spoiler, this fight will be kept standing with some huge strikes being exchanged, some bombs being thrown in the octagon. We're going to see some explosive fireworks between Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway to close out Dustin Poirier's illustrious MMA career. It's unfortunate this man never officially became a world champion, but this is going to be one way to be remembered. A warrior going out on your shield, fighting the best of the best. I can't wait for that fight at UFC 318. And what it looks like will close out the summer of UFC, which will be UFC 319. The main event for August 16th, where you'll see Dricus du Plessis defending the middleweight title against Khamzat Chimaev. So I think this is the biggest fight that can be made at the middleweight division. I said that I saw this fight coming a mile away months ago on the podcast. DDP versus Khamzat Chimaev. This is going to be one hell of a fight for the main event of UFC 319. Now, DDP has been on a dominant run and has defeated Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, and it's 2 victories against Sean Strickland in championship format, or in a championship fights, I should say. Meanwhile, Khamzat Chimaev has looked impressive since debuting to the UFC. Now, I know health and other things have derailed his momentum, and that's why we haven't seen him so frequently in the octagon. But when that man is available, in his last 2 fights, he defeated Kamaru Usman, and he dismantled and lockjaw. And when I say about lockjaw, he dislocated Robert Whittaker's jaw when he got in the octagon in his last meeting against one of the greatest middleweights of all time, Robert Whittaker. So, and I'll also throw in Khamzat Chimaev's honorable performance against Gilbert Burns as well. But I want to see how this fight plays out, because DDP's awkward style, being unpredictable as a striker, with his grappling skills against Khamzat Chimaev, who's overall across the board a phenomenal fighter. And when he's at his best, he could be unbeatable with his wrestling abilities, mixed in with his dangerous striking abilities. Whew. Chef's kiss to the UFC executives. We're going to have a fun summer with these 3 main event fights that will be headlining the respective UFC pay-per-views this summer. These 3 fights, I can't wait to talk about it more with you guys, but those are my thoughts on the 3 big fights that will headline and be main event fights for the summer of UFC this summer.